April 11, 1995. Buckinghamshire, England. Nick Marshall, a contractor, arrives with his son at a sprawling property on Spriggs Holly Lane in Radnich, a village so remote you'd get lost without knowing the area well. They're scheduled to do renovation work at the Brown residence, a farmhouse sitting on 11 acres of peaceful countryside. But as Nick approaches, something's wrong. An alarm is blaring from inside the house. He moves closer to the window, peers inside, and freezes. A woman lies motionless at the base of the staircase. Her name is Janet Brown. She's 51 years old. And within hours, this quiet corner of England will become the center of one of the most perplexing murder investigations in British history. Emergency services rush to the scene. When officers step inside, what they find defies explanation. Janet's hands are cuffed behind her back. Brown parcel tape covers her mouth and nose. She's unclothed, but there's no sign of sexual assault. Blood spatters the walls and ceiling, evidence of a vicious, repeated attack to her head, likely with a crowbar or metal bar. The house has been thoroughly searched, drawers pulled open, rooms rummaged through. Yet nothing appears missing. The television and VCR are unplugged but still sitting there. £100 in cash remains untouched in the kitchen. And then there's the entry point, the patio door. Someone tried to cut a careful, man-sized hole through the glass using specialized cutting equipment. Then, inexplicably, they abandoned that quiet approach and simply smashed their way in. Who was Janet Brown? And why would anyone want her dead? Janet Brown wasn't just a random victim. She was a woman whose life revolved around helping others. Born in Southampton, Janet trained as a midwife before transitioning into public health work. She spent her career as a research nurse at Oxford University's John Radcliffe Hospital, working in primary care. Her colleagues described her as dedicated and compassionate, someone who genuinely cared about making a difference. Her family painted a picture of a woman who was calm, gentle, and always present. She was married to Graham, a research chemist in the pharmaceutical industry whose work occasionally took him abroad. Together they raised 3 children: Zara, who had recently graduated university and moved to London for her first job; Benedict, 21, away completing his degree; and Roxanne, 17, the youngest, still living at home. Zara later recalled that Janet was the steady presence in their lives, especially when their father traveled for work. Her family was everything to her, Zara said. She was a really good mom. The family lived in what should have been an idyllic setting, a secluded farmhouse surrounded by rolling countryside. But that isolation came with concerns. The area had recently experienced a string of burglaries, and Janet took security seriously. She joined the local neighborhood watch program and insisted on installing panic alarms throughout the house, one by the front door, another beside her bed. Neighbors knew her as vigilant and organized, someone who kept an eye out for anything unusual. The irony would become unbearable. The woman who tried so hard to protect her community couldn't protect herself. April 10, 1995. Monday. Janet finishes her shift at the hospital and says goodbye to her colleagues. She heads to her Volvo, probably thinking about the evening ahead. The family home is in the process of being sold. An offer has been accepted and soon they'll be moving on to the next chapter. She drives back to Spriggs Holly Lane, expecting a quiet night at home. Her husband Graham is away in Switzerland for work. Benedict is at university. Zara is in London. Roxanne had originally planned to spend the evening at home with her mother, but those plans changed at the last minute. A friend had just passed their driving test and they wanted to celebrate. Roxanne leaves around 3:30 in the afternoon. Janet is alone. Around 8 o'clock that evening, she answers a call from one of Roxanne's friends. The conversation is routine, nothing unusual. She sounds normal, relaxed. At 8:20 p.m., Nick Marshall, the builder, tries calling to discuss the next day's work schedule. No answer. At 9 p.m., Graham calls from Switzerland. Again, no answer. A neighbor drives past the Brown house around 10 o'clock. She hears an alarm going off, the external siren, the kind that alerts the whole area. But when she passes by again later, the outside alarm has stopped. The internal alarm, however, continues to wail inside the empty house. The panic buttons had been pressed. One by the bed, one by the front door. Investigators would never determine which one Janet managed to reach. Those alarms meant one thing: Janet knew she was in danger. She tried to call for help. But in that remote location, with the nearest neighbors too far to hear clearly, the alarm became nothing more than background noise in the countryside night. When Nick Marshall discovers Janet's body the next morning, investigators descend on Spriggs Holly Lane. What they find is a crime scene that makes no sense. Detective Superintendent Mike Short, a 28-year veteran of the police force, later admits he's never encountered anything like this. The killer brought tools, handcuffs, 2 types of tape, glass-cutting equipment, probably a flashlight, and a metal weapon, possibly a crowbar or truncheon. This wasn't a spontaneous act. This was planned. But planned for what? The patio door tells a strange story. Someone spent time carefully trying to cut through the glass, working methodically to create an opening large enough to climb through. Then, for reasons unknown, they gave up and just smashed the glass instead, making enough noise to wake the entire village. Here's what makes it even stranger. This wasn't a house that looked empty. Janet's car sat in the driveway. Lights were on inside. Anyone watching would know someone was home. Yet the intruder entered anyway. Once inside, they moved quickly. It takes roughly 30 seconds to get from the patio door to the upstairs bedroom. That's where police believe the confrontation happened, where Janet came face to face with her killer. A small piece of tape was found on the bedroom floor. Janet's clothes were folded neatly beside her bed. Her dressing gown lay on the floor. The handcuff key was discovered under her body. The autopsy revealed the horror of her final moments. She'd been struck repeatedly in the face and head. Marks on her body showed she'd been forced onto her back. The tape around her nose and mouth was so tight she likely suffocated within minutes. But here's where the case becomes truly bizarre. Even with the alarm screaming, the killer didn't flee. They stayed in the house for over an hour. They searched room after room. They washed their hands in the bathroom. Diluted blood was found on the bedroom light switches, proving they cleaned up and then went back upstairs. What were they looking for? What could possibly be worth that risk? Detective Superintendent Mike Short and his team conducted one of the most extensive investigations in the region's history. 2,500 inquiries. Nearly 2,000 witness statements. Fingertip searches of the grounds and surrounding fields. Every surface in the house examined for prints. They developed 5 main theories. Each one had problems. This was the obvious starting point, but it fell apart immediately. Burglars don't strike when cars are in the driveway and lights are on. They don't spend an hour searching a house with an alarm blaring. And they definitely don't leave empty-handed. The TV and VCR were unplugged but not taken. Cash sat untouched in the kitchen. No safe was searched for, no jewelry box pried open. If this was a burglary, it was the strangest one imaginable. Could someone have hired a hitman to murder Janet? The theory seemed possible at first. After all, the killer came prepared with restraints and weapons. But contract killers work fast. They complete the job and disappear. This person stayed for over an hour, methodically searching the house while an alarm announced their presence to anyone within earshot. That's not professional. That's reckless. This theory died quickly. Despite Janet being found unclothed and restrained, forensic evidence showed no sexual assault, no indication that the crime had any sexual component whatsoever. Whatever drove this killer, it wasn't that. Graham Brown held a high-level position as a research chemist in pharmaceuticals. Could someone have targeted Janet to get information about his work? Could this have been corporate espionage turned deadly? Graham himself didn't think so. His work, while important, wasn't the kind that would warrant this level of violence. And if someone wanted information from him, why murder his wife instead of approaching him directly? The theory went nowhere. Maybe the plan was to take Janet, to hold her for ransom or use her as leverage. But if that were true, why kill her in the house? Why not force her into a vehicle and leave? The killer made no attempt to remove her from the property. Detective Superintendent Short summarized the frustration perfectly in April 1996. There is no theory to explain what happened that night which makes perfect sense. There are aspects of every theory which are contradicted by the facts, and policemen deal in facts. He continued, the intruder showed a fair amount of planning. He had an iron bar or truncheon, 2 types of tape, handcuffs, a glass cutter, and probably a torch. I have a gut feeling that it wasn't a burglary. He didn't react like a normal burglar. More than 99% of burglars would run on hearing the alarm go off. This one not only continued his murderous attack, but coolly washed his hands and went upstairs again. We don't know the motive. In most murders, once you've got the motive, then you're a long way to cracking it. Investigators appealed to the public, hoping someone had seen something, anything unusual that night. A neighbor reported seeing a car parked in an area known locally as the Triangle, set back from the road near the Brown property. In a place where everyone knows everyone's vehicles, a strange car at night stands out. But the lead went cold. No one could identify the vehicle. The items the killer brought became crucial clues. The handcuffs were common, impossible to trace. Same with the masking tape used to gag Janet. But the cellar tape, the all-weather tape used to try cutting the window, that was different. It wasn't ordinary tape. It's the kind used to repair greenhouses and outdoor glass structures. Only 1,300 rolls had been supplied to the local area that year. Investigators hoped someone might remember selling multiple suspicious items together. Tape, handcuffs, a glass cutter, all purchased by the same person. The appeal emphasized the blood. Whoever killed Janet would have been covered in it. We're talking about Monday the 10th of April, which is the week leading up to Easter, one investigator said. And somebody that evening would have gone home with really a lot of blood. No doubt at all about that. A lot of blood. Someone must have noticed. A spouse, a friend, a family member. Someone had to have seen a loved one come home that night drenched in blood, with scratches or injuries acting strangely. Someone had to have asked questions. Such a brutal murder as that, somebody must have spoken, the investigator continued. The person who did it must have confided in somebody. So I really would ask anybody to come forward to stop it happening again. A reward of £10,000 was offered. It would later increase to $20,000. 10 months after Janet's murder, the investigation received a strange development. 2 messages were left on an answer phone. A man speaking carefully, not identifying himself. The police immediately recognized these weren't prank calls. The way he spoke, the details he provided, this person knew something. An urgent appeal went out. Please come forward. We need to talk to you. Your information could be critical. But the man never called back. He vanished as mysteriously as he'd appeared, leaving investigators with more questions and no way to contact him. Who was he? Why reach out only to disappear? Did he know the killer? Was he protecting someone? Or was he afraid of what coming forward might mean for his own safety? To this day, that caller has never been identified. For the Brown family, Janet's murder didn't just take her life, it shattered theirs. Roxanne, who had left the house that afternoon to celebrate with a friend, carried crushing guilt. My friend's mom was a little bit nervous about her driving quite a distance when she'd literally just passed her test, Roxanne explained. So our plans changed that day, which I've always felt really guilty about, that I wasn't there with her that night. The family never returned to the house on Spriggs Holly Lane. How could they? The place that had been their home, their sanctuary, was now the site of unimaginable horror. Could never feel safe again. Roxanne moved to London to live with her sister Zara. She commuted back to finish her A-level exams, but the trauma followed her everywhere. Both sisters became hypervigilant about security, installing grills on their doors and windows. Zara suffered panic attacks, waking in the night listening for sounds that shouldn't be there. I found myself having panic attacks and just crying uncontrollably, Roxanne said. I guess all the trauma just has to come out, doesn't it, at some point? The passage of time, which is supposed to heal, did nothing but add more pain. In most cases, grief eventually softens. The sharpest edges dull. People learn to live with the loss, even if they never truly get over it. But unsolved murders don't work that way. There's no closure when the person responsible walks free. Every day without answers is another day of injustice. Every year that passes makes the questions louder, the pain sharper. Mom was always there for us, Zara said. Like many moms, she was juggling working life with family life, but her family was everything to her. She was a really good mom. She was calm and kind and gentle. She was alone that night, sort of defenseless, Roxanne added. And that's why it's so hard to try and understand why somebody felt the need to handcuff her and be so violent and brutal towards her. She was bludgeoned to death, which is a horrible thought. It just is baffling. 20 years passed. 2 decades of waiting, wondering, hoping that someday, somehow, there would be answers. Then, in 2015, investigators announced something remarkable. Advances in forensic science had made it possible to re-examine evidence from the crime scene using techniques that didn't exist in 1995. Items were submitted to forensic labs, and the results came back with something tangible: a DNA profile. Male DNA. Not belonging to anyone in the Brown family. Not from Graham, not from Benedict, not from any known visitor to the house. This was the killer's DNA. Detective Chief Inspector Peter Byrne held a press conference. We have a DNA profile that was left at the scene, he announced. With the DNA evidence we have, we can easily implicate or eliminate people from our investigation. Finally, after 20 years, they had something concrete. Something that could definitively link a suspect to the crime. But there was a problem, a massive, frustrating problem. The DNA didn't match anyone in the national database. And that database held over 6 million profiles. More than 1,000 men in the area were screened and eliminated. Investigators appeal to the public to submit names of anyone who might have been involved, anyone who seemed suspicious around that time, anyone whose behavior changed after April 10, 1995. Peter Byrne refused to reveal which item the DNA had been recovered from, a tactical decision to protect the integrity of the investigation. But he made his position clear: somebody out there knows who killed Janet. We're asking them to make contact. With the DNA discovery, the Brown family spoke out publicly, their voices carrying the weight of 30 years of grief. "Our mom's murder was planned and brutal," they said in a statement. "The horror of her death stays with us every day. She was attacked and killed in our family home, a place where we should all be safe. There is new DNA evidence which will help Thames Valley Police bring the killer to justice. But we need your help to find them. If you know or suspect anything, no matter how small you think it might be, you can call the Major Crime Investigation Review Team or Crime Stoppers. You can call anonymously if you have to and help us find who did it. She was a kind and loving person, and her death broke our hearts. The impact on Roxanne's life has been permanent. It's made me very wary of people in certain situations," she said. "Quite security conscious. I won't go for a run on my own in the woods or in the countryside. If I'm going anywhere, I always make sure somebody knows where I am." Thames Valley Police made it clear they're willing to consider all possibilities. Even if the person someone suspects is now deceased, DNA can be obtained from living relatives and compared to the profile found at the scene. The reward stands at £20,000 for information leading to a conviction. 30 years later, Radnage looks much the same. Rolling Buckinghamshire countryside, quiet roads, the kind of place where serious crime seems impossible. But one question echoes louder than ever: who killed Janet Brown? Every aspect of this case defies logic. Let's review what we know. The killer came prepared with specific tools: handcuffs, tape, glass-cutting equipment, a weapon. This suggests planning, intention, purpose. But then their behavior contradicts that planning. They tried to cut the glass quietly, then smashed it loudly. They entered a house with clear signs of occupancy. They stayed for over an hour while an alarm blared. They searched thoroughly but took nothing. They restrained and murdered Janet with extreme violence, but there was no sexual assault, no evidence of personal rage or vendetta. They washed their hands and calmly continued searching. None of it makes sense. Was the killer local, someone who knew the area well enough to navigate the remote roads? Or were they an outsider who'd studied the location beforehand? Did they know Janet would be alone that night? Or was it chance that Graham was in Switzerland and Roxanne's plans changed at the last minute? Was Janet the target specifically, or would any person alone in that house have suffered the same fate? And perhaps most haunting of all, what were they searching for? What did they think was in that house? 3 decades have passed since Janet Brown was murdered in her home. 3 decades of pain for a family that deserves answers. 3 decades of a killer walking free. But this case isn't closed. Far from it. Modern forensic science has given investigators the most powerful tool they've ever had: DNA evidence that can definitively identify the person responsible. The killer's genetic code is in a database somewhere, waiting for a name to be attached to it. Maybe that person is dead now. Maybe they're living a quiet life somewhere, thinking they got away with it. Maybe someone close to them has suspected for years but never found the courage to speak up. This is where you come in. Janet Brown was a midwife, a nurse, a mother, a wife. She dedicated her life to caring for others, to bringing new life into the world, to helping families through difficult times. She didn't deserve what happened to her. No one does. Her daughters, Zara and Roxanne, have lived with this trauma for 30 years. They've never had closure. They've never had justice. They've never had the answer to the simplest, most painful question: why? Janet Brown's story shouldn't end like this: unsolved, unanswered, unfinished. Somewhere out there is the person who knows what happened on April 10, 1995. Somewhere out there is the truth. This case can still be solved. This family can still get their answers. This killer can still face justice. It just takes one person with the courage to come forward. And don't forget to like, share and subscribe.